the school board meeting for Tuesday, April 18th, 2023, for the Des Moines Public Schools to order. Ms. Rios, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Ms. Alonso Diaz,
Here.
Ms. Bradley,
Here.
perfect, Ms. Caldwell Johnson,
Here.
Ms. Knox,
Here.
Ms. Martirana,
Here.
Ms. Norris.
Here.
Ms. Sawyer.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. The first item of business on our agenda is approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
Martirano, so moved. Norris, second.
We have a motion from Martirano and a second from Norris to approve tonight's agenda. Please cast your votes. Jackie? Kelly? Duana? Are you a yes? We've been having a few technical difficulties, so,
Okay, here I am, Bradley,
Oh.
yes.
okay, great, thank you. Motion is approved, 7-0. The next item on our agenda is the public forum, followed by the consent and regular agenda. We provide speakers at the public forum an opportunity to address the board for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the board agenda. We also allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak during any portion of the business meeting, please email rosa.rios@dmschools.org. The same speaking protocols apply to all individuals who wish to address the board. Speakers will be called individually, and we ask that they state their name and address prior to providing their comments. Students and minors do not need to provide their address. Guests of the board are encouraged to speak to matters relating to the programs, services, and operations of Des Moines Public Schools. Please remember that Iowa law prohibits us from discussing specific employees or their job performance. We ask all speakers to avoid references to personalities or character attacks, as those types of comments do not contribute to the purpose for which this public forum exists. The use of inappropriate language will not be tolerated, and individuals choosing to do so will be gavelled out of order and asked to excuse themselves from the premises or escorted out by district security. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in a discussion with public forum speakers, as it is our obligation to discuss only matters posted in the public agenda for the sake of transparency and the opportunity afforded to all community members. Matters requiring attention will receive appropriate staff and/or board follow-up at a time after the meeting. Thank you for your participation. We appreciate your feedback and input. Ms. Rios, do we have speakers for the public forum?
Yes, we do. First up, I'd like to call Tamara McDaniel. Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker, Heidi Rhodes. Okay, next speaker, RJ Miller. Those are all the speakers we have.
Thank you. We'll now move to district recognitions. Do we have any this evening?
We do have a couple here. We have, Des Moines Public Schools recently won some awards at the Iowa School Public Relations Association. We were essentially best of class in 3 categories. Thank you. 3 categories: branding and imaging campaign and short video, both related to the Come Here, Become Here campaign, as well as photography. And we were recognized in every category that we entered, which included several videos and more photography, as well as our response to the cyber attack. Secondly, we're only a few weeks into the season, and that's soccer, that is, but we've got some noteworthy achievements thus far as we're getting other ways. For some of our boys' programs, Hoover is ranked number 1 right now in Class 3A, while East High School is ranked number 5, and Roosevelt number 16 in Class 4A for the boys' soccer. We're looking forward for some state championships from those programs.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Matt, and congratulations to Phil and his staff and also the IT staff. And of course, we love soccer, so go team.
Yes, we do.
The next item on our agenda is item D1, monitoring report on Goal 1. I'll turn the podium over to Interim Superintendent Smith to share the presentation, and Board Member Kelly Sawyer will facilitate the board discussion of this monitoring report. Matt?
Thank you so much. So this interim goal report is interim goal 1A, which is the percent of second and third grade students meeting benchmark on FastBridge CBM reading, and with the goal of it increasing from 54.3% in June of 2022 to 70% in June of 2026. So again, this is an interim goal that is in relationship and in service to the broader goal of the overall percent of fourth grade students proficient on the Iowa assessments. So this interim goal is meant to give us some predictive value that whether or not we are on track with our inputs and our investments in early literacy. So a few things that are going well, but before I do that, it's probably important to announce that this interim goal is on track. That's always a good report to have to start off the night, is we are on track for this interim goal, and we are actually looking really, really well in going into our spring assessments for this same interim goal. So we're excited to get the spring results back. So again, this is measuring fall to winter CBM reading for a collapsed data of second and third grade. So there's several things that are going well for us right now in this particular interim goal and as the data that surrounds it. The first is that 96% of our students in second and third grade maintain literacy skills from fall benchmark to winter benchmark. That's a significant data point. The goal for the state is 95%, and we were at 96%. 2 years ago, we were at 88% for this same data point. So, and then a year ago, we were at 94%, and now we're at 96%. So that is demonstrating that our investment in access to core instruction is not only taking hold, but students are maintaining and sustaining those skills from fall to winter. That's how you begin to build not only just momentum as a system, but you begin those foundational skills where students don't begin to lose those skills over the summer months. They come back with more skills, and we start off in the fall at a much higher level in terms of proficiency in reading than we did in the previous fall. So this is a really good sign for us, and it's a great indicator. The other aspect that is a great indicator is that all second and third grade student groups made gains from fall to winter. So when we look at, again, this is collapsed data for all students, but when you break down the groups of students, every single group made gains from fall to winter. We didn't have a single group of students slide backwards. Also a great sign. Other things that are going well for us, investment in aligned professional development is improving. And again, what we're speaking specifically about is the professional development around FAST and panorama training for school leaders, as well as leadership teams at the building level, as well as the science of reading training for coaches and strategists at school. The reason why we lift that up, it's a very cohesive professional learning system. And so everybody's got to be knowledgeable, from the principal to the associate principal to the instructional coaches to the strategist. Everybody's got to have a depth and breadth of data literacy around what data points we're monitoring to make sure that we can be have actionable next steps in the moment. The other aspect of that is that we're just growing our capacity as a school system. So specifically around the science of reading, where a school system gets into trouble is when you have to reinvent the wheel every single year. We don't have to reinvent the wheel because our retention rates are up for staff, as well as the science of reading is taking hold and building our capacity as an organization. So we're beginning to see some of those results as well. Other aspect that is going well is we're pretty proud of the fact that our investment for ELL programming and that new model that ensures all students have access to grade level core instruction is resulting in two very significant data points for us. First is that second and third grade DMPS students who are enrolled in ELL programming are outperforming both the state and our Heartland Area Education Agency schools. So we are outperforming basically everybody. And so that's a great data point to have, and it really speaks to the model and the implementation of not only school leaders, but our district level leaders, and making sure and ensuring that our students who are enrolled in ELL programming have access to high quality grade level core instruction. It's not a pull-out model. It's about making sure that students are actually in those classrooms and they're experiencing that language acquisition with their peers in the core classroom setting. And then we pull them out when needed in order to gain those language acquisition skills and provide those supports. But we are making sure that they are in there receiving the core instruction. The other data point that's related to that is 49% of our second and third grade black males who are also identified as ELL met benchmark. Again, that's also higher than the state and the Heartland Area Education Agency schools. So we're outperforming basically everybody in the state on that one as well. So those are areas of that are working really, really well for us. There's always something to improve upon. There's always areas to get better, and we've got a few of those articulated for you tonight. The first is just the over-identification. Again, and what we mean by that and why I place that in that report is if we use special education as an example, especially at K-1, 2, that's where the highest rates of referrals for students to special education actually occur. And that can happen for a lot of reasons. But what we've got to continue to do in our system is make sure that we're monitoring and providing intervention to students and not just immediately assigning them to special education as a intervention in and of itself. We have to make sure that we're giving students access to that core instruction and that we're giving them the supports in the classroom. We've got skills block being taught across every building, across all of our classrooms. All of those access points, if you will, to high-quality grade-level core instruction, that GLEAM instruction that we've talked about, that in and of itself will allow us to actually no longer identify students or over-identify students unless they need the support service of special education, as an example. So on average, I think, and Shelley might be able to correct me on this, but it's around 12%, 10 to 12% is where that state and maybe national average, am I correct in that? I'm looking out there, 10 to 12%. And so we have some schools where we might have as much as 18, 19, 20% of students identified. That's not to say that some students don't need it. We might have 16% of students or 70% of students that actually need those services. But we have to look at that data point and go back and say, all right, why is that? What's happening in these classrooms? What's happening in this school? What's happening in all of our schools to make sure that we are, just, again, not over-identifying if that's not the state, if we're above the state or national average of where that might be. So we still have some work to do there, and we've got some inputs that we think are going to make a difference for us moving forward. Other area that we have to continue to get better at is that we have not had a common evidence-based curriculum for specially designed instruction. And again, this is specially designed instruction for students with an IEP. These students are receiving core instruction and they're making growth in the classroom. But right now, we're not making the aggressive growth that we need to make sure that we are closing gaps for students with IEPs. And so there's some work to be done and some inputs that we're going to engage in for the remainder of the year and specifically move into next year when it comes to having a common research-based intervention system specifically for students who are receiving specially designed instruction. And again, of course, the current monitoring system for instructional practices is not sufficient. What that is referencing is it's a multi-layered approach to monitoring instruction, which includes professional learning communities with teachers, peer-to-peer monitoring, instructional coaches, providing those learning cycles for teachers, and school administrators being in classrooms and making sure that we're providing feedback to teachers on what's working, what's not working, and how we might improve those instructional practices and make sure that we're teaching that curriculum with fidelity. While we do that in the core classroom fairly well universally, where we're not doing that, or in some of these specially designed instruction classrooms, we're not getting into those classrooms as district office leaders, as curriculum coordinators. We've got some opportunities there to improve our monitoring systems and how we provide support to teachers in those particular areas. And so to address that, right, so we roll right into what are we going to do next. We're going to continue to make sure that we have a tiered support system for schools that are not meeting their second and third grade winter goals. And what that means is, and we can dive into some details about this as the questions emerge, is we know now where schools were in the winter, and so we are deploying a higher level of intense services of supports to those schools to make sure that they are data literate, that we are building their capacity to do so, and that it's more eyes, more hands on deck, making sure that students are actually receiving that high quality core instruction in the classroom, and when appropriate, when they have that specially designed instruction, that we've got staff there to help and assist those schools to get that done. Other areas that we're going to engage in terms of what we're going to do next. All schools will be implementing EL skills block in K1, 2, and 3 in the 2023-2024 school year. We're almost there right now. We still have a couple of schools that are not implementing just yet. And again, it's important to note that it's not because these schools are not necessarily getting results. They are actually getting results. But when we talk about a universal system and providing some research-based skills block supports to staff, those schools and those teachers are actually not getting that right now because they've got another intervention that they're actually utilizing. So we're moving towards that, and these school leaders are all in. They're bought in, and we've got some opportunities there. We're also looking at these last two particular bullet points that were in your report, the 95% group, which is an evidence-based and aligned program that will be provided for Tier 2 and Tier 3 reading intervention. That's going to help move the needle again. It's going to allow us to get to students in the moment of learning in the classroom as well as the Wilson reading system, which will be implemented in all of our special education classrooms. That specially designed instruction intervention that is research-based. It's also important to note that those intervention systems also check the box when it comes to the criteria for dyslexia and making sure that we're meeting that screener and we're providing those supports for students. I'll conclude that what felt like, even in my head, a very rapid summary of the report with, we're on track and we're excited about it. So.
All right, thank you, Matt. I want to share with the community our process as we go through monitoring. So as a board, it is our responsibility to listen to community voices, set a vision, monitor the district's progress towards achieving that vision, and make investments that support the vision. To monitor progress, the board will spend time during board meetings reviewing data specific to the goals and the guardrails. Progress monitoring is an opportunity for the board to ask questions to help us understand whether there is alignment between our vision, our goals, and our reality, current student performance, and growth. To understand whether we are making progress, we will ask, does reality match the vision? Is there growth toward the vision? And is there a strategy and plan sufficient to cause growth toward the vision? We will analyze data by student groups and ask specific questions to help us better understand the needs of our students. This review of data will better inform our decision-making as a governing body when we review policies, budget, and other district initiatives. It is important to emphasize that as the board, our role is to set direction and vision and monitor the district's progress towards achieving that vision. This means it is the superintendent's role to identify and implement strategies that will result in progress towards each goal. We will be responsible for holding the superintendent accountable and consistently monitoring progress in public. Each monitoring report will be specific to a goal. The monitoring report will have data that shows how we are doing compared to the targets or goals we have set for ourselves, which Matt just went through with us. You will hear board members asking questions to understand what is working and where there are gaps. Some specific types of questions you will hear us asking will include who is struggling, what gaps exist between student groups, why is it important in one area but not in another, how do we know our strategies are working. These types of data will help us better understand the equity, learning environment, and opportunity for our most marginalized students, which will allow us to make more informed decisions related to budget and resource allocation. We will have a discussion of conditions and solutions. The goal is to better understand the temperature across a large system of what conditions are currently in place and what solutions are we exploring moving forward. To help everyone follow along, I know it's a short report, maybe about 3 pages, but if, as you are asking your questions, please indicate the page number and data you are referencing. And as mentioned by Matt, we are reviewing the data for Goal 1A. So as a facilitator, I will do my best to ensure that we have a clear understanding of the superintendent's evaluation of our progress as a district specific to the goal, that I will work to capture key action steps that the superintendent will implement to make progress towards the goal by our next monitoring report. I will capture information on specific actions coming in the future that the board can anticipate, such as approval of contracts, budgets, or policies to drive progress on the goal. Identify any follow-up from today's session that the superintendent should bring in preparation of the next review of this goal. And additionally, try and keep us on time and ensure the conversation is focused on the data that is specific to this goal. So one thing that I would ask you to do, I think it's on your, if you would pull out your laminated sheets, please, or if you want to follow along, that's fine too. I'm trying to see where it's on. I'm going to knock this thing, the microphone. I think it's on here. Yes. So at the top of, I think it's like the second page. There are 4 questions there. So before we monitor, we want to make sure this report has the information in there that we are seeking. So I would just ask my colleagues, does the report clearly show what is being monitored?
Yes.
Yes. Does it clearly show data from the 3 previous reporting periods?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Does it clearly show the current reporting period?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And does it clearly show the target reporting periods? Annual targets and deadline target?
Yes.
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 Okay. Does the report clearly show the superintendent's evaluation and interpretation of performance relative to the goal?
Yes.
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 And does it clearly show supporting documentation that evidences the superintendent's evaluation?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right, thank you. With that, we are ready to begin, and so I will open it up to my colleagues to see who has questions.
I'll go first.
Please.
So I am really excited to hear you say, in fact, Mr. Matt, if you would repeat it, when you said that we are outperforming everyone. Would you just say that again? Because it sounded really
Yeah.
good.
We are outperforming everyone.
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 Okay. So in the investment in a service model for students in ELL, what is it about the service model that's specifically working, that's making or helping us outperform everyone? When we say the second and third DMPS students are outperforming, what is it about the service model that's working?
Yeah, thank you. So what's specifically working is, and I'll reference our LEAP plan here, is access to core instructions immediately. So in years past, what we may have done, and again, a lot of this is student-specific, but what we may have done and likely have done are our emergent students who are in our ELL program. They might have been in a sheltered language acquisition classroom and not in the core instruction classroom to receive that high-quality core instruction with their peers, their age-like peers. And we've done the sheltered instruction with good intent, with good hearts around just making sure that these students feel comfortable in the classroom. And what we know about these students is that they're incredibly resilient and they want to be with their peers in the classroom. And so they've developed language acquisition supports in the classroom along with the high-quality, standard-based instruction that they're expected to know and to learn to move forward. And so the reason why I'm referencing our LEAP plan is because your question specifically around like what's the difference? A lot of it is mindset. It begins with mindset, right? Even when we talk about GLEAM, that grade level engaging, affirming, meaningful instruction, it begins with a mindset about adults around what students are capable of and what they can achieve at really high levels. And so making sure that students have access to that core instruction began with a mindset with adults to say students can do this. They can gain language acquisition skills while being in the core instruction and receiving that core instruction explicitly from their teachers. And so I'm going to read a little bit from K1 as well as 2.5 from our LEAP plan that sort of, I think, helps answer the question that you just asked, is that teachers provide language supports and scaffolds through direct teaching and or collaborative lesson planning. So it's that direct and explicit instruction in the core classroom, not in a sheltered classroom. And that's K1. In second grade through fifth grade, what we've got written in our plan is that targeted English language development instruction is provided to students using ELP standards or English language proficiency standards and grade level curriculum. Teachers provide language support and scaffolds through direct teaching and collaborative lesson planning when possible. So again, it's about making sure and ensuring that these students have access. We continue to go back to that access point. And in previous years, students who are receiving English language services were not receiving access to high-quality core instruction. Thank you.
So thanks. Are you done, Maria? Yes. Okay. Congrats to everybody and all the people who've worked so hard to get on track. That's always exciting. A clarifying question around the 49%, which is the state, you mentioned that's the state benchmark. Are we, if you were to, I don't know if disaggregate is the right term, but if you were to look at that by race, are we still outperforming the state benchmark by race?
Ask your question one more time. I want to make sure I'm tracking.
So the state benchmark of 49%, that's all students.
That's black male students in ELL, receiving ELL services. Students that identify as black males that are also in our English language learning program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The second question I have is, as you think about summer, and you mentioned how good it was that 96% of students maintain those literacy skills, do you assume, and that was between fall and winter?
Correct.
Do you assume that you would have the same, I don't know, stickiness rate over the summer? And/or is there any programming being offered to complement supporting these goals during
Yeah,
the
I
summer?
don't know that I could answer that question yet. I think we still got a lot of work to do about what we're learning now and what we're seeing from winter to spring in terms of the stickiness of this and how this is continuing to, and the sustainability that we have right now. I think obviously that we're expecting and predicting based on these results and a few other contextual, anecdotal evidences from teachers and from principals that you're going to see in the same level of sustainability and skill maintenance from the winter to the spring, which sets us up in a better position for summer programming, if you will. We don't need to go back to some of these micro phases of I'm going to get the name wrong here, but I want to make sure I've got it for you. Pre-alphabetic sort of micro phases that we taught at the beginning of the year. We don't necessarily might not need to do that in the summer programming if it continues to stick. Does that answer your question?
Yep. And then one other, I've been thinking a lot about parent engagement lately, and so I'm wondering when a student tests, I'll just say not proficient, what is the parent engagement or family engagement mechanism? Is it down to the student and to the parent?
So if I could, and I'm looking at our coach, but I feel like, is that more of a tactical question?
It would be a technical question, and I'm not putting it focused on. It is making an assumption about parent engagement as a strategy to meet the goal, versus asking the superintendent an open-ended question about what he believes is a strategy.
Okay.
Strategies that are.
So if I could ask my colleague to look at reframing the question maybe as an open-ended question that's not directive?
Can you share how families are engaged to support high-quality curriculum and grade-level instruction?
Yeah, so it is at the classroom level. And so engaging families, the research is going to support that. If we don't engage families, then we're likely to lose student engagement in that classroom. And so it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we are engaging families in that. And it does happen at the classroom level. That's where it begins, if you will, in terms of the parent or the teacher reaching out to the parent to talk about the student's learning progression and where they are. And what interventions might be in play in the classroom level, but as well as to invite the parent into the conversation around the potential of a level 2 intervention, or tier 2 intervention, or a tier 3 intervention, which may be the student receiving core instruction and then more, and then something else, right? So that something else could be something after school. It might be something during another part of the school day. So that's where it really is important to engage that parent in that conversation for all the reasons that we would intuitively know about, but specifically so that the parent is fully aware of the strategies being deployed and being utilized to support their students' learning progressions.
Okay, so, and if I ask it wrong, somebody else tell me how to reframe it. Is a parent or guardian engaged if a student is not proficient?
I'm going to say yes, but I don't have a data set behind me to say 96% of students who were not meeting benchmark, their parent was contacted. So I don't have a data set. I have anecdotal evidences of the parent contact logs of staff, of schools, and what that looks like, sounds like at student parent-teacher conferences, things like that.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that then? Is parent engagement a part of our programming, and is that any reason why you say we're outperforming? Or is that currently not a step in the programming that we offer?
It's not been a universal strategy. Yeah.
On our first chart of data, we show that 50% of our second and third grade students are meeting the benchmark. Who is struggling the most in the other 50%?
Students with IEPs. And that's, again, it's not that students with IEPs are not showing growth as a group. They are showing growth. They're just not showing the typical or the aggressive growth that we need to see to close gaps. And that's where, again, we come back to, what are we going to do next? Is we got to really hone in and implement a universally research-based intervention system, both with that 95% group as well as that reading Wilson reading system, to make sure that we are addressing that need.
Hey, Kim, can I just ask a clarifying question? So, are students with IEPs also all SPED, or are there students that have IEPs that are not considered SPED?
No, students that are students with an IEP are students in our special education program.
Okay, so they're literally one and the same.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
With
Sorry.
variations.
With variations, I
Sure.
got it. I just needed to make
Yes,
sure I had
thank you.
that clarified in my head.
Can I ask something else? Or is someone else's turn? With our Black males in ELL, who does that include? What is their background? Are these students immigrant refugees, people that have just arrived, or are these students native to this country?
These are students that are immigrant refugees to our country.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question is coming from this second page, when you're talking about what's not going well. And it's a kind of a two-part question, but I know one of the bullet points there is over-identification. Can you talk to what is leading to over-identification, and also talk about the impact maybe that has had on the system as far as over-identification? Could you just speak a little bit more to that?
Sure. So what leads to the over-identification are two things specifically. One is bias, and the second is where you've not yet reached critical mass, if you will, of core instruction with all students, right? So we're looking for 80% to 85% of our students meeting benchmark in that core instruction. And when you don't have 80 to 85%, and you fall below that, you begin to over-identify students for special education services in this particular case, as an example, and look for that to serve the students' needs in the classroom. And while that may be the need and the support that the student needs and requires, there are so many different interventions and there are so many different scaffolds and supports that we can provide in those classrooms that would truly let us know, is it a matter of a student with a learning disability that needs those support services in special education, or is it perhaps a root cause of the student did not have preschool and is learning how to actually do school, if you will. I'm using air quotes, Dawn, I don't know if you can see me. Learning how to do school. And so all of the learning of both content as well as the learning of behavior and how the social interactions, all of that is taught by our primary grade teachers. And so if we don't have that 80% sort of critical mass of meeting benchmark, then we begin to over-identify students with great intentions into programs that we think might help them, and then we lose that momentum of providing those supports and scaffolds within the classroom itself. We begin to lose access to that core instruction at an earlier age. I think the other reason I think I started with was bias, and I think bias comes in obviously in many forms, right? It's a bias. I'm going to call it racism. If there's racism bias, there's bias around socioeconomic status and about whether or not students from poverty that are showing up to our classrooms that may not have had pre-K access are now in a first, second, third grade classroom, and where they might be not performing at benchmark, we then begin to over-identify students into a special education service or some other program that just might be too soon. And I'm trying to be careful with my language about that, because what I don't want to suggest is that we don't have students that don't need those services, because we absolutely do. And that's why we have a process and our child guidance team that goes through that process with students and with families and with staff members. But what we know is like what are state and national averages and where we need to be. And in some cases, and in this case, in terms of special education enrollment, we're higher than those averages. Again, we're lower in some schools, but we're higher overall.
Thanks, Matt.
On page 2, you say 96% of our second and third grade students maintained from fall to winter, which is great. What do you attribute that that level of maintenance to?
Continuity and consistency of implementation of the EL curriculum, of the professional learning that we're providing, staying the course, if you will. Again, I think what we're starting to see is that capacity built, and we're beginning to develop system-wide momentum and a depth and breadth of knowledge around how to teach literacy, how to implement skills block. And in speaking with colleagues even today about this specific report, that's a lift. An implementation of any new curriculum is a lift, but when you talk about all the data that is involved in a skills block, for example, and all that teachers have to know and think about in terms of the students that they're serving in the midst of a skills block to make sure that we're gaining those foundational skills, there's so much there. And we've stayed the course, and what we're seeing is folks as adults are developing some automaticity around knowing what to do and how to respond when a student needs that intervention or needs that particular scaffold in that lesson, and even can get to a point right now where we've got some really highly effective classrooms where they can predict where their students are going to actually find challenges because they know exactly where they are and they're utilizing the curriculum for its intended use.
Thank you.
No, go, it's fine. I don't have it quite formulated, go ahead.
I have two questions. One, how are teachers how are you giving feedback to teachers if they are not making typical or aggressive growth? You identified that as something that you're looking to tackle.
Yeah, how are teachers given feedback when students are not meeting typical? Through learning cycles, instructional coaches, school-based administrators, also district-level supports, curriculum coordinators, of just providing supports to teachers, asking questions. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Where might we be helpful for you? And in some cases, it might be, I just need an extra set of hands, right? I just need a few more eyes, a few more hands in the room. Okay, so we look to find you where that might be. Is that an extra set of hands through an instructional coach or an interventionist during skills block specifically, or is that during content block, or where might we need to find those points of entry of support for the teacher? Because it could look different just depending on what the teacher's needs and the dynamics of the classroom. So it's a lot of asking questions about what teachers might need.
Great, thanks.
If I might, it also has to do sometimes with the experience and the tenure of the teacher, right? Sometimes teachers that are more experienced might be further down the road with this because they've been teaching it for the last few years, whereas a teacher is novice to this particular curriculum and they're new to the profession this school year. We know some of those things obviously on the front end, so we look to provide additional supports for those teachers and make sure that they've got those learning cycles and that we're providing that with on the front end. And there's times when we just need to know that we got to go provide more, and we just need, similar to what you would do with a student, we do the same thing for a teacher. You get core professional learning and supports, and then more.
Great, thank you.
This might be a similar answer to what you just said to Jackie, but can you tell me about how you're supporting teachers as they're implementing the EL skills block in K1 and 2, like how you plan to provide them support through that rollout?
So
Yeah,
if I could table that, would that be more of a futuristic question that we would get to on the how section as we kind of keep ourselves focused on the who, what, why? Okay. Thank you. So any other who, what, why questions about the data, the report?
So I know that this is actually page 2 of the report, the first bullet around 96% in second and third grade maintained literacy skills from fall to winter. And then the second bullet there is all second and third grade groups made gains from fall to winter. I think that Kim has already asked the question around who's struggling the most, and you identified SPED. But can you also identify, of the students in SPED, how many of them are Black males, approximately?
I can, I just don't have that data with me.
Okay, that's fine.
Absolutely.
That's
But
fine.
I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, if you can circle back. And
I
then
surely will.
my second question really is around that second bullet. All second and third grade student groups made gains, but who made the greatest gains? We talked a lot about the gains that were specific to ELL students, et cetera, but in this regard, who were the students that made the greatest gains, and to what do you attribute that?
Students in ELL programming.
Okay.
And it's due to that access to that core instruction.
Okay.
That was followed closely behind our students who identify as Black males, was the second leading percent of growth for students.
Thank you.
Are there additional who, what, why questions before we move into the future?
So I think this may have already been asked, but you talked about under the ELL program, which would be on page 2, where we referenced not only the second and third grade ELL students who performing or outperforming the state and AEA, but then also those that were meeting benchmark. And you referenced the model and access to high-quality core instruction. So I have to assume that professional development and other things led to that. But was there anything else around sort of the core instruction that was different this year that would have been sort of a game changer or something that would have moved the needle more significantly?
I don't think it was one specific thing, right? So it does begin with a mindset around what we believe kids are capable of. And so having that shift and really moving from a very different model, a model that where you have got a sheltered language acquisition program that's not in the core classroom setting, to having students who, again, are new arrivals to 2 years in the program that are still early in what we call emerging in their language acquisition, English language acquisition, being in core classrooms with their English-speaking peers, not only developing those English language acquisition skills, but also developing the core content language and learning literacy content, learning math content language. That's been the game changer for us. That's been the most significant change in what we're doing this year versus what we've been doing in years past. And what's required of that is collaborative planning from teachers. Our teachers who are in our English language learning program, our core content teachers, is making sure that we're collaborating around those unique specific needs of those students in those core classroom settings.
Can I ask something about that? Just, I don't know if it's a clarifying question or not. So, So what's currently happening is the mindset. So the change in the mindset of adults and the collaborative work with teachers, their lesson planning. So is it the communication between teachers, or is it the communication from teachers to students, and the way that mindset is projected?
Yeah, it's both. I think it begins with those things because it is literally a philosophical difference in models. Whereas, again, previously we had students in sheltered instruction not in their core classroom receiving grade level instruction. They were not. Now they are. And it's a complete shift in how we do business, if you will, in service to these students. And it doesn't mean that these students, for example, emergent students that were receiving English language learning supports are in the classroom all day long. They do come out to receive those language acquisition skills at certain times, but they got to be in there for content block. They got to be in there for skills block, right? And we have a lot of students that are not only are they in there, they're asking to stay in there. They want to continue to stay in those classrooms and not only learn that language from the content itself, the standards content, but to interact with their peers because they're developing English at a faster at a faster rate because they're talking. Because part of the design of the curriculum is that students are grouped to talk. It's not individual work that you do quietly by yourself. You are grouped with a partner and you are engaged in conversation with your peers around learning the content and the standards.
Thank you.
Duana, do you have any more questions?
No, not in the
Right,
who, what, why.
Thank you. I just have one question, Matt, which is, and I apologize if you may have said this, but I'm trying to keep my head focused on everything. But on page 3, under what we are doing or what we're going to do next steps, you do talk about tiered support for schools not meeting their second and third grade winter goals. So what is not working within those schools? Like, are there themes that you're bringing up and identifying?
There's a couple of themes, and the themes are around. Go back to my notes, but specifically around we've got lack of skills block in a couple of schools. And if we have a school, for example, that's where the percent of students meeting benchmark is significantly lower, it's going to impact this data quite a bit, right? And so we've got a couple of schools in those realms, if you will. And so when we're getting lower results in that regard, then our deployment of more intensive supports and resources to those schools is intensified now that we've got that in the winter results. So there's more supports and help for that school to engage in that. Could you repeat your question? I want to make sure that I'm answering it fully.
Now I got to remember. Yeah, I was just wondering with those schools that were not meeting the second and third grade benchmarks, what were themes that you were pulling out, and maybe could you identify where there may be concerns? In those
Intervention,
schools?
that was it, thank you.
Okay.
So when we talk about that tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, the schools that are not meeting goals or not progressing like we would like to see, a lot of that is because they don't have a structured intervention time in that tier 2, tier 3 to support students. And again, we're talking about all students, but also students with IEPs. And so what we do see on the other side, on the flip side of that, is our schools that are making the most significant gains do have a very structured, they're utilizing Wilson, or they're utilizing a very research-based intervention system, and they've got a plan for it, and they're monitoring for that. And so we need to scale that and grow that, but we're going to these schools now that we're not meeting benchmark to help install that system of supports.
Any additional who, what, why questions? All right. So now the future. Jenna, you had a how question.
Yeah, I feel like maybe you already hit on it, but if you could talk specifically about how you're supporting teachers as they're working to add skills block into their K-1 and 2 classrooms for the 23-24 year?
Yeah, it's multifaceted and sort of multi-layered. The first layer is that instructional coach at the building level, who's also been trained in the science of reading and the implementation of skills block, content block in that EL curriculum. The second layer, if you will, at the building level is the school leaders who are also receiving that same training and also have that same sort of growing expertise in the science of reading and early literacy and what to look for. Connected with that is making sure that these same staff members are being poured into or enriched with data literacy around what to look for in classrooms, not just, what does FastBridge tell us, but what are you seeing in your formative assessments in the classroom that would let you know whether or not you need to actually add a scaffold here or you need to preview some content for these particular students there before you jump into the next lesson. So there's the building level layers, but then there's also the central office level layers of providing that district-wide PD, that ongoing PD and continuous improvement supports to continue to bring experts into the classrooms for teachers. We still provide consultants across the district. We're still working with EL consultants, and many of them are school-based and go to many of our schools, and so we continue to offer some of that objective expertise from folks coming in that are bringing in that national research while we're trying to build, again, our capacity moving forward.
But just to clarify, I don't know, I hit it a bunch of times. Just to clarify, we already, though, have in each school a coach and...
We do.
Okay, so it's scaling, it's just kind of redeploying their efforts out to support classroom teachers to make that switch?
It is, and it's every day, every year, every week, we get better at it because we're developing as adults that automaticity around knowing what to do and what to look for and what to predict in the next lesson. And so all the PD, if you will, the foundational PD to staff has been delivered. And so now we're refining that craft and continuing to build our knowledge and our expertise in these areas and knowing where we might find enhancements to our lessons, where we might bring in, a particular support or a resource because we know where students struggle, and now we're able to actually get ahead of that rather than respond to that in the classroom. We're proactive rather than reactive.
Knowing what we know about skills block and the Wilson interventions, how are you going to address the schools that are not currently utilizing that? Or how are we going to resolve the divide with the schools not utilizing the tools that we've identified are working?
With a balance of seeking to understand while also making sure that we're understood about what research-based interventions offer students. And the reason why I guess I offer it up in two parts is part of supporting schools is asking why. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Why are you not doing this? Why are you doing that? What's working for you? How do you see that playing out in your particular context? And so I think it's important that whether we're at the district office or at the building level, that we're always leading first with asking questions and asking where is that particular strategy or that thinking actually getting you results. You have to balance those questions with, at the same time, an urgency around, and we've got to get kids moving down the road on their learning progression. So it's not about meeting goals. It is about meeting goals at this table, don't get me wrong, but I know that each of us at this table understand that the goals are representative of a much larger picture around literacy for students and what that means for them in terms of it opening their doors academically in their careers as they move forward. The goals mean a lot more than just a number of percentages of students meeting benchmark. And so there's an urgency around this work. And so our job at central office in our deployment of resources is not just to ask questions. That's the first thing we do. But we also have to instill a sense of urgency and install systems in schools where we are monitoring for instruction, we're monitoring for implementation, we are progress monitoring students for learning, and we are intervening appropriately and timely within the lesson, whether it's a tier 1, 2, or 3 intervention, as well as providing those additional supports if we're still not seeing results in student learning.
Thank you.
Matt, in the weekly update that you sent back when we asked what could we do to help, and you said, champion the district focus on implementing high-quality curriculum. And then you talked a lot about, it's about mindset, belief that each student can learn at high levels and achieve at high academic levels. Can you tell me what will the district be doing to share or highlight the importance of this mindset to students and family?
My pause is because my mind immediately went to like marketing strategies, right? In terms of what does that look like as a district stance on mindset around access, and what's the role of the school, what's the role of the student, what's the role of the parent in ensuring that access. And so the reason for my pause is while yes, we are communicating via Snap Connects and all the channels that we currently have around where students are for each individual parents in terms of their own students' learning progressions and where they're successful and where there's opportunities for us to continue to provide supports for these students, I do think it's important that as a district, from my role, that we organize while we're creating marketing strategies for next year, that maybe we look at the marketing strategy around literacy and what does that mean for us as a community and what does that mean for parents. Parents have a lot going on and they have a role and a right in their child's education. So I'm saying that out loud in the idea that they have a right to know that literacy is actually a gatekeeper for academic access every year that a child is attending school. And so we've got, we'll need to formulate that beyond thinking that I'm providing right now into a robust strategy.
Yeah, and I think thank you. I didn't expect you to have all the answers, but it's this idea of it is a mindset shift is going to take multiple partners, internal and external likely.
Absolutely. Well, and we know too that the grade level standard-based instruction that students are receiving, this is rigorous instruction. Some of the emails that I get most often are the curriculum is too difficult. It's too hard. I think may have received one here not that long ago. And that's not an infrequent email that I get. And so I think it's important to continue to lift up that challenging curriculum is grade level and standards based. It's actually what's expected. And our kids can do it. They absolutely can do it. And we have to be better as an organization in supporting students and families to have that same mindset and belief that they can do it and they can achieve at those very high levels.
Thanks.
You mentioned that the reason for over-identification is our bias. Can you tell me how we are going to address the implicit bias that exists in our system?
Two ways. One is that we continue to need to offer training and support for professional learning around what bias is and how it actually creeps into our decision-making, both at the classroom level, the building level, and the central office level. But the other are the addition specifically of integrated associates that are going to receive very specific training going into next year. So every school, every elementary school at the K-1-2 level is going to receive an integrated associate that's going to receive very specific training, not only on behavior management skills, de-escalation, all of those things, but also bias training around making sure that we are providing everything that we can in classrooms for scaffolds and supports and interventions before we go down the road of identifying our student for special education services. And again, I'm going to asterisk, several students need those services, and that's the right thing to do, and it's a great support for kids. And our data in many respects and across several schools would say that we're over-identifying students. And so we have to be able to actually address it in that fashion.
I had a quick question. Given what we know about the growth in our student population, which at least for now, has been immigrants and refugees, ELL learners, English language learners. You indicated that we've made, decent strides, within that population. But you also shared that the place where we're struggling the most is with our special education students. Given what's happening in the teaching profession and our ability to recruit and retain teachers, especially those with ELL and SPED endorsements, feels like it's probably one of the heaviest lifts that we have. But when you think about this data, how do you then buttress that with strategies around recruitment and retention that are specific to those that are either making great strides that we want to continue to advance or those that are struggling the most?
Yeah,
So if I could, because I feel, is that a technical? Just go.
That's fine.
Go with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the current retention strategy, we've actually, we're offering a retention bonus going into next year for teachers in special education. For many of the reasons that you just lifted up, knowing that there's a skill set and an expertise there, and in many respects, tenure that is highly irreplaceable. And so we know that that is an area of the organization that we have to provide a retention bonus to. I'd love to provide it to everybody, and put that out there for all these watching. I'd love to provide it to everybody. But knowing that we need to target supports for our students who, with an IEP, we are providing it for teachers in special education as a recruitment or as a retention strategy. In terms of recruitment, it's also about not different than what we would do to recruit teachers to any position, is looking for those positions that are hard to find and hard to reach, and offer bonuses, sign-on bonuses to join Des Moines Public Schools. And then specifically just making sure that we are taking care of them, whether that is through the mentor program, our affinity programs, whether that's through coaching and support in the classroom. It's just different for every individual that we hire for. But those recruitment and retention strategies don't look drastically different, except for the idea that we are offering retention bonuses for teachers in special education.
Okay, I'll stop.
Matt, can I ask a clarifying question? So over-identification is not going well. You spoke about how you're going to be putting associates in all of the buildings to focus on K-1, 2, and trying to find alternative paths before identification, or sort of exploring all options before identification. Is that the strategy that you have to address what is not going well, or are you planning on evaluating also current students with IEPs? Or does that happen on, and trying to, are you looking at trying to lower it
looking to-
now
yeah.
versus taking people out
Yeah,
of an IEP?
We're looking to
program?
mitigate the identification earlier on. Students that currently have an IEP, that is reevaluated every single year with the IEP team, and that process is in play and it's set. Our goal is to reduce the over-identification of students moving forward.
I had one other quick question. So on page 3, under investment in current support structure for students with IEPs is not supporting typical and aggressive growth, you mentioned no common evidence-based curriculum for specially designed instruction. So how's that going to show up, or how did that show up in the budget we just approved?
Yeah, so you'll see dollars spent on expanding the Wilson Reading System, intervention system, as well as the 95% group. So we have dollars allocated and earmarked for utilization of those specific intervention systems for FY '24.
Yeah. That's obviously a level of specificity that we don't get to in the budget because it's really part of a broader, but I just was really, inquisitive about
Thanks for
whether
the
or not-
connection to that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Duana, do you have any how questions?
No, my how questions have been answered.
Okay, thank you. Are there other?
How can the
future-
board help?
Thank you.
Yeah, continue to champion that the course that we're on is the right course. We got to continue to, again, to develop our adult automaticity and actually getting better and serving. At the central office level, I'll utilize that first. It's serving our schools. Our quality of service to schools has to continue to improve and be refined so that we're putting out the best product we possibly can for our school leaders and our teachers and our instructional coaches and all of our staff, our associates that are engaged in this work every single day. And continue to be responsive and agile to their needs. And championing this work as this is the right curriculum because, again, it holds a very high standard and high bar around grade level curriculum. Because as educators, it's really common for us to want to over-scaffold and over-support students so that they are experiencing success. And oftentimes when we do that, we lower the rigor of the content, we lower the standard, and students might be successful, but they're not successful at grade level. And so we got to continue to hold that line around that curriculum that we're teaching students right now and maintain that is actually going to move the needle for us. It is going to get us down the road. It's going to build capacity, and every time we use it and every day, every week that goes by, we will develop our automaticity as adults to continue to get better at our craft. Because I know you probably get some emails that say this is hard, and it is, and it's meant to be, and our kids can do it.
All right, thank you. I think I had one item for follow-up. Terry, you had asked a data question, is that correct? Okay. Matt, you have
I've noted
that
it.
info?
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. All right, now that we've concluded our question section, I have some questions for you as to whether or not we want to move to accept this monitoring report. So we would ask ourselves the following questions. First, does the reality match the vision?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone disagree with that? Okay. Number two, is there growth towards the vision?
Yes.
Yes.
And lastly, is there a strategy and plan sufficient to cause growth toward the vision?
Yes.
Yes.
Would anybody disagree with any of those questions? All right. So with that, I guess I don't move to, is that you, Terry, do I turn it over to you? Although,
Sure.
if I could, after we vote, I just have one more little thing to address around the monitoring section.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
your facilitation, Kelly. Really appreciate it. I would entertain a motion and a second to approve item D1, monitoring report, goal 1A. Goal 1, interim goal 1A.
Martirano, so moved.
Alonso, second.
We have a motion from Martirano and a second from Alonso. Is there any further discussion, or does anyone have any additional questions? Hearing none, please vote.
Bradley, yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Kelly, you had something else you wanted to bring up?
So typically at the end of our monitoring section or sessions, we would go through and evaluate ourselves on how we did in that monitoring process. This is changing, and so I know you all received an invitation from, oh, help me, Sibme. And it's really around going in and looking at our own questions and how we would evaluate those questions. So that evaluation process will look different moving forward. And so with that, I would just, at some point, I'm assuming we will have conversation with our coach Cindy around how we move forward with that evaluation process. So we will not go through that process of evaluating our monitoring at this time.
Thank you. With nothing else on monitoring, we'll move to the consent agenda. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing the board's discussion, deliberation, and determination as deemed necessary. Ms. Rios, do we have any speakers for the consent items?
No, we do not.
Great. Ms. Bradley, I believe you have the consent motion.
Yes, I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $4,086,654.37.
Is there a second?
Martirano, second.
We have a motion from Bradley and a second from Martirano. Is there any further discussion or questions on items included in the consent agenda? Hearing none, please vote.
Bradley, yes.
Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is other items. I would ask my board colleagues if they have any items that they'd like to share for the good of the order. Ms. Sawyer?
I don't think we're there yet.
Point of order.
aren't.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are in our other items.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I'm getting way ahead of myself. Item F1 is personnel recommendation, receive and file action. I'll ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board receive, file, and take action on the superintendent notice and recommendation to terminate the continuing teaching contracts.
Is there a motion and a second to accept the superintendent's recommendation?
Norris, motion to approve.
Sawyer, second.
We have a motion from Norris and a second from Sawyer to approve and accept the superintendent's recommendation. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
Bradley, yes.
Motion passes 7-0. We have one item in our informational items, that is the Polk County Conference Board minutes of the 8th of March. Now we are at items of privilege. So I would ask my board colleagues if they have anything to share. Ms. Sawyer.
I do not at this time, thank you.
Great. Ms. Knox.
Yeah, I just wanted to officially welcome Dr. Christopher Manise to Des Moines Public Schools, who is going to be our North High principal, to that role. And also thank Ben Graber as he transfers over to serve at Capitol View. So exciting additions to DMPS's leadership.
Thank you. Ms. Martirano. Nothing. Ms. Bradley.
I have nothing.
Ms. Norris.
I think I've spoken with some of my board colleagues about Heather Semmelmacher. Selmanecker, exactly. She is in the activities office, and she's leading a lot of the Title IX efforts. And I, want to just do a nice shout out to her because she's working really hard to look at every facility in the district and address the Title IX inequities. She also is starting and is well on the way of creating a student athlete scholarship for a female. It can be applied to an apprenticeship, a 2-year or a 4-year college. And so I'm going to be sending a note to my board colleagues, and any of you who are not familiar with this program, if you can chip in just a little bit, it's a great way to honor a student athlete, a female student athlete from every district in DMPS. So, and there's also cool logo, so cool attire. So I'll be getting everybody's size because I'm going to be buying, and you can pick what school you want to represent, but I'll be buying everybody a piece of swag to celebrate Title IX. And thank you, Heather.
Ms. Alonso.
Nada. Nothing. Thank you.
I don't have anything specific to report, but in agenda planning tomorrow, I'd like for us to consider receiving an update on the Drake Stadium at a subsequent board meeting. It feels timely to be able to share that and give the board sort of a sense of where we are and if we're on schedule, so.
Yeah, and I believe we have a meeting with Drake coming up really soon, actually. So maybe next week? Next week.
Okay, great. Perfect. I don't have anything else. I'll turn it over to the interim superintendent for his report.
I actually don't have a report. I gave it earlier on. I wanted to start the meeting off with some celebrations and some awards, and so double down on that again. Congratulations to Phil and team and everybody for continuing to do a great job. I'd be remiss if I didn't just take a moment just to continue to thank our students, staff, and our families for your persistence and your ever hopeful and optimistic mentality. And so we can never have enough of that. So thanks for continuing to show up for one another. We love and we appreciate you.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, both those of you that joined us here in the boardroom and those of you that are joining us remotely. We greatly appreciate you and the time and attention you're giving to the work of the most important elected body in the city of Des Moines, the Des Moines School Board. So with that, if there's nothing else and without objection, our board meeting is adjourned, and we'll take a brief recess before we go into a discussion of our board self-evaluation with our coach. Thanks, everyone. 5